Our next guest this week is a hypnotist who does shadow work with through tarot readings. She is a coach, an author, an artist, and a YouTuber. I'd like to welcome Jen Wilding to the show. How you doing, Jen?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's nice to have you on. I know we're gonna have maybe cover some topics that maybe we've touched on in some of my past episodes, but I don't think quite like we're going to with you. So this is good. We'll have some new exciting information maybe. Um, doing your research, I doing some research on you, I should say. I noticed that some of your YouTube videos, I was watching them, and it was obvious to me that you're a very highly intelligent person, a deep thinker, and I just kind of was wondering, like, what is it about you that drives you to have this deep understanding of things?
Well, thanks for the compliment. That drives me to have the deep understanding. I'm definitely a curious person, and I have been for a long time. Like I'm very much driven by curiosity and learning and wanting to understand things. I'm a seeker. I of truth. I really want to get to the bottom of something, even if it's an ugly truth. It appeals to me because I think that we can't really make positive change unless we really can see we have to work with, the good and the bad. So, and that comes with even doing shadow work too, is that kind of work is about being able to look at things that are what we're afraid of, what we feel ashamed about, and be able to sit with them and be okay with them, to just see, not necessarily approve of it, but just to be able to be with it. And I think that has helped me absorb a lot of information because I don't have as many boundaries with things that I can learn. I can go into an area of learning and absorb information without worrying that it's going to change my point of view to something that I wouldn't want to be changed to. Um, I can play in different models and let them be models where I'm just exploring and and have fun with that, and not have it be something that's threatening.
That's well said. How did you get involved in this helping others, and how did this all begin for you? How did it get started?
Ah, it's kind of an interesting story. I mean, I've always been a type of person to enjoy helping people, but I think that a lot of people are that way on some level. It's very rewarding. But this particular avenue of helping people through coaching work, archetypal coaching, and hypnosis work, I love working in the subconscious and with the imagination and in a creative capacity. One of the ways that I can say inspired me into this direction is when I was younger, I was very interested in the theater arts, and I did a lot of acting, and I was really good at it. And I could really transform myself into being another character. And then I would get really good feedback of, hey, you were really good at that character. Like, you're really good at acting. So, when we're told when we're younger that we're getting that kind of feedback, it's something you become more like, oh, okay, this is my path. Like, this is something I'm good at. I'm going to see what else is here. And I continued in that path through high school and even college. My background is in theatrical performance as far as my studies go. And I studied method acting. And in that process, I started to go through a self-discovery that was kind of uncomfortable to realize, but it was that I was using theater for therapy, essentially. And I came to this realization that, and part of it was that I was attracted to becoming characters that were very different from who I am as a person. So I was using it as an excuse to explore things that I had put in my own shadow, I'd repressed. Like, I can't be this way because I might be rejected. But if I'm a character acting this way, or I get to be, even if I get to be a malicious character, or I get to, vent, I get to be angry, or I get to be assertive, where even in some capacities, I didn't feel comfortable being assertive in areas of life that I wanted to be, but I could be on stage. It was sort of compartmentalized. I started to feel a double reward for not only did people like my performance, but I was getting a sense of satisfaction from that isolated expression of those characteristics. But it's still not healthy because it's compartmentalized. And then what happened was I was kind of complaining that I did a musical and I was very outgoing on stage. And when some of my professors saw the show that I was in college, they started treating me differently in class, where I had liked to be very introverted and quiet. They started to think, now they thought of me as, oh, she's that girl I saw on stage. And they started calling on me more, and they started wanting to banter back and forth. And it made me really uncomfortable. And my initial complaint was, you know, they're being jerks because don't they know what acting is? Like, this is acting. They think I'm going to be the same on stage. And I put it on them. That was my projection. But then when I really had to analyze it, as someone else who was picking up on my criticism brought to my attention, and I had to confront it, was, but you are the same person. But that is also you doing that. So it's a matter of deciding who you want to be. And then when I came to terms with that, it was, oh, wow. Okay, so now I don't have any excuses. If I want to be aggressive in life, I know how to do that because I can do it on stage. If I want to be, able to confront somebody in a really powerful way, I know how to do that on stage. So why can't I? I'm the same person. It's just different context. And then when I made that connection and I started realizing, whoa, what if I applied this to my life? And I started creating the character of my life and then applying method acting, which is essentially self-hypnosis processes, to this, and really infusing it and shaping myself. I had to really first know that that was possible, but discovering that that was possible, integrating those. Now it's not compartmentalized. Now I'm integrating it into myself as, oh, I can do that if I choose. And that's a feeling of empowerment that is so strong that once I discovered it, it was like, whenever I encountered anyone else who was feeling disempowered, I wanted to give it to them. I wanted to say, you can do this too. We can do it together. Let's work through, like, what do you want to be? Let's shape it. Because if it's in you, if you have the desire to be that person, that collection of whoever that is in your mind, those archetypes reside in you. It's just a matter of activating them and integrating them into your present life. And so I really enjoy bringing that into people's lives.
That's interesting. And that must have been very, obviously eye-opening to you. Perhaps scary at first, or,
Yeah.
uh-huh.
Yeah. And that's part of it. Facing your fears is part of the work. But what happens is you start to, when you have tools, you can very quickly understand how you can reference points even in your past. When you're able to identify what the challenge is, you can start to build what I call a proof set of successes you had in that area in your past that you've forgotten about or you didn't give yourself credit for. And when you start to focus your mind in that way and you start to attach that proof set, it's like the evidence is there. Like, oh, you can do this because you did it in this area. And in the same way that theater was the compartmentalization for me, I knew I could do it because I could do it on stage. I have no excuse. But we have that in our lives where we may be one way at work, but we can't be that way in relationships. Right. Or we may be with our friends one way, but we can't be with strangers. But that we have the capacity to do it in any part of our lives means we just need to do some tweaks to the way we view ourselves in the narrative of what we want to bring it into.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's well said. The power of hypnosis. Talk to me.
About the power of hypnosis? Do you have experience with hypnosis, Dylan?
Slightly, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I've been hypnotized. I've had a couple regressions done, past life regressions and stuff like
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Okay. So you've had an experience. I think the power of hypnosis to me, I would actually reframe it to say it's more the power of the subconscious mind and building a relationship with the subconscious mind. Uh, Depending on what kind of hypnotist you talk to, I'm kind of one of the variety of hypnotists that would say that a lot of things are hypnosis. We go in and out of trance all the time. So it's a regular part of uh, our day, and it's a natural process. When I'm working with somebody new or they hear that I do hypnosis, if they have a Hollywood version of what that is in their mind, they think it must feel incredibly different than anything they've experienced, because they think, oh, I haven't been in a trance. But the truth is we go in and out of trance all the time. So it doesn't feel unnatural, it feels very natural. But then what the challenge is when you are working with a client, if they had that expectation going in and I didn't work with them on that expectation of it being natural, they might have expected it to feel like otherworldly, um, which you can do a lot of otherworldly kind of things with hypnosis too. I mean, going into past lives is with an intention, going very deep. But to be honest, to be really effective working with the subconscious, you don't even have to go very deep into hypnosis. Uh, you can, I mean, we're hypnotized by language. Marketers know this. We're hypnotized by imagery. You know, people who Hollywood knows this. I mean, it's it's mostly about influencing us through story and narrative and connecting to us emotionally. And really, when you have a heightened state of emotion and something is going in and it connects, it doesn't, it fits with your value set, then it's probably going to stick more likely than something that doesn't fit. For example, it would, when people ask, can you create a Manchurian candidate kind of thing? Can you make somebody do something like kill another person? My answer to that is you can, but only if you're a con artist and they believe you. Only if you're a con artist that cons them into thinking they're doing it for something that they would really kill somebody for in their existing value set. Otherwise, they would reject the suggestion. So that's why you're never going to be like, if people have seen the movie Get Out, I don't know if you've seen that movie.
No,
It's
sorry.
it's sort of a scary movie that came out fairly recently, where a gentleman is being hypnotized by his girlfriend or fiance's mother to stop smoking, and she ends up sort of uh, getting him to feel stuck in a sunken place, and it ends up being a very evil thing that she's doing. And from that movie, a lot of people got a very negative impression of hypnosis. So sometimes now when I tell people I'm a hypnotist, they say, oh my gosh, I saw Get Out. And it's sort of like, I don't know, that's kind of spooky stuff. But the truth is that you can, knowing that you can reject it at any time, that whatever she's telling you, if you don't want to go to the sunken place, you can just reject it. And even if you're in a relaxed state, you will. It's only if she were to take you someplace that you believed was a good place to go would you follow along. So it's that kind of a thing that needs to be explained now because of other references in our pop culture. But I will say that hypnosis from an influence standpoint from mass hypnosis is a real thing. But again, it goes back to conning. It goes back to using false information. As far as, you know, what I'm thinking of is propaganda kind of stuff.
It can be so
Mass.
helpful as well, right? I mean, if it's
Oh,
used for the right reasons,
absolutely.
very positive, powerful stuff it can do for people's lives, right?
Exactly. I mean, that's what I was talking about with the transformation, the positive transformation I was talking about earlier, is that, uh, and I would say, again, it's more the relationship with the subconscious mind that it is the real effective thing, and that you can build over time. And that also increases your intuition. So it's very, you can feel more comfortable in any situation when you have a handle on how to affect your own state of being, which is what you can do with hypnosis.
Your unique method of scripting someone's life. What is that? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Scripting someone's life. So I have a method of, it's called Sokape method, scripting your life using character, archetypes, plot, and ensemble. And it is how I work with somebody when I'm working with a client, the way that I am going to take the kind of path I'm taking them on for coaching. And at the heart of it is that all of the change that we're really seeking to change behavior in our life, to have transformation, comes at the identity level, at the answering the question, who I am. And so that's where the scripting of first who you want to be comes in. And that's through the character that is appealing to you, that you feel like you want to be, but you aren't at the moment. And sometimes you can use references from book characters, movie characters, celebrities, family members you admire, and kind of get a collection of, like, I see traits in other people that I know that I admire. How can I integrate more of that? How can I be more organized? How can I be more fit? How can I be more intelligent, thought-provoking? I see these traits in other people. So it's a matter of starting to identify how that you appreciate that it is something that exists in your subconscious, and it probably exists in your past in other contexts. So parsing those out, bringing those to the surface, identifying limiting beliefs, which would be things related to the archetypal structure within them, that anything around fear and shame, that's kind of things that they were attributes that were repressed because they were not accepted in early childhood development is something that's common for a lot of people. So identifying those and revisiting them as an adult and really challenging them from a truth perspective. There's a lot of logic involved but it's the act of making what we don't think about, that is something that is subconscious, conscious. And sometimes it's even hard to know how powerful that structure is. There's an exercise I do with people, I could even do it with you and your audience could do it, to get a sense of what the subconscious mind feels like accessing it.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't mind.
No, let's go for it.
Okay. So Dylan, when you think about, this is going to be about time, like calendar time. If I were to say to you, I want you to think about what you were doing last year around this time. How did you get there in your mind from a calendar perspective? What was it? A visual? Was it a movie?
It was a quick thought of what today actually represents for me, and it just so happens to be my wedding anniversary today.
Oh, okay.
So I was able to like think real quickly on what we did for our anniversary last year, and that it just kind of like popped in my head.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
So that there's more of a boost there for you to remember what you were doing for your anniversary last year, perhaps, because it's an important event. When did you go? I'm going to ask you a little bit more about the process of how you got there. So you remembered that it was your anniversary. How did that come to you? Did you see words? Did you see pictures? Did you see memories?
I seen numbers. I seen like
numbers.
the 11th, the calendar. I seen the calendar and the number 11.
Okay. And is it like a monthly calendar or a daily calendar? Is it an online calendar?
Yeah, like a monthly calendar.
Okay.
And then I quickly thought of my wife and then thought of what we did last year.
Gotcha. So that process that I'm helping you to access is some way that you had the 11th come up. You saw it as the numbers really big. And then you saw the month, and it maybe as it appears in your calendar. Then you had the flash of, well, it's a significant day. You thought of who it's significant with. You had an image come up of your wife. So these are modalities of how we're interacting with our subconscious, but we don't usually think about our process. And for me, I got asked this question by somebody many years ago, before I was even a hypnotist yet, but I was still interested in these topics. Somebody who was at a party, who was somebody who was developing software for brain education programs. And he was going around asking people how they orient to time. And he asked me, and I went off into this, and he asked me some of these questions. It was about time, and I described these like ribbons and how I see the year and how I can go in on a track, and and I just went into this thing, and I realized I've never had anybody ask me that before, and I've never had to think about how I think about time, but everybody references it differently. We're all communicating about time, and it also may affect how we experience the flow of time, even just from that structure. So, and you get into the details of like, what's the font on the calendar? And for you, it may be referencing, it sounds like there's a real calendar that has maybe a block font, or that you're used to.
Yeah, block font.
So you're seeing an existing calendar that you reference, and just that day. But for me, if somebody were asking me what I do last year, I actually see the whole year as a wheel. And I actually have to think about, I actually go into the wheel. So it's a whole different thing. So that's a taste of what it's like to get into the subconscious material, that this is it feels both kind of new and familiar at the same time. It's like, oh, it's an everyday thing, but I don't every day think about how I'm thinking. So now if we just take that piece and say, oh, I don't think about how I'm thinking for everything I do behavior-wise. And beneath that is our subconscious that includes all these different parts of ourselves that exist archetypally. And we know they're there because even in our language, it's coded when we say, well, part of me wants to do this and part of me wants to do that. And anytime we feel stuck in an area of life, it's really that there's a couple of archetypes that have a value set that's in conflict, because you have to make a decision, but they both want something that's opposing. And sometimes people will feel stuck for a long time in life just because they need somebody to kind of extract out what's going on there, what values are in conflict, what characters are represented by these values, and what do you want for the overall scope of your life? How can we look at that? And how can we start to play with what's there? What other resources are there that haven't even entered the conversation yet that maybe we want to bring in? And that's something that I can do. The hypnosis part would be when somebody's in a nice, relaxed place, and all that we're doing with that. And this is the magical thing about hypnosis, is it's a state of non-resistance. And that if you're into law of attraction, if you're into just energy work, and any of that, there's such a benefit to being able to practice a state of non-resistance. It's kind of a neutral state that allows us to create something new in a forward momentum from that state. So that's why it's a very positive place to be for transformation, because what you resist persists. That's from Carl Jung.
That is so fascinating. And then with this, do they have to practice this to, I don't know, get better, or is this like a or once or twice thing, and they're able to kind of get past whatever it is that's blocking them or bothering them?
It depends, but for a lot of the larger shifts, it's really just bringing it out and then showing them the tools, and then from there they're good. And then, but also I usually provide a tool set of things that can help bolster and bring like shortcuts to bringing back a particular state, to bringing back, a self hypnosis state so they can go into non-resistant states themselves and understand it. My approach isn't to, as much as it would be better for me financially to have people coming to me on an ongoing basis. And they do come for different things, for various things from time to time, but it's different than, it's not an all the time thing. The clients that I work with, I'm mostly working on, let's sit down, let's see what your tool set is. Let's learn your subconscious mind, what tools are there, and let's see how you can get empowered in this area of your life. And a lot of times those tools can be transferred to other areas. And then, you know, I often will work with somebody. You can do change in a single session, but because the type of work that I enjoy doing most is educational for long term, I mostly, if I'm working with somebody, would do a new person 5 sessions. So it would be like a 2-hour session that's a very extensive interview to learn more about them. And then it's about sort of doing suggestions, going out, having them do some implementation, get some feedback, coming back in a couple weeks, and then working and from there saying, how did that go? What else came up? Sometimes you uncover other things. But for the most part, it's not something that would be ongoing for a long duration. It's a skill set that you can apply for the rest of your life. So
That's fascinating work. Can you talk a little bit about the shadow work with tarot?
yeah, that's my newest offering, because I really enjoy working with archetypes, and uh, tarot cards are generally very archetypal, but what I like to do is work with character archetypes, and a traditional tarot deck is not necessarily character archetypes. The major arcana cards tend to be archetypes like Emperor, Empress. Um, but if you have something like Death, it's more of an event archetype. But to me, Death represents the predator, so the threat of. So what I do when I'm working with clients, if I'm working with tarot cards, is I have an entirely different set of archetypes based on those cards that I use. So it's a different way to read them that translates the card into a specific character archetype. And from there, I'm able to discern the value that we're working with and figure out, based on the problem that's come up for them in the reading, the cards will kind of invite the subconscious to investigate specific shadow aspects related to those archetypes. So basically where we have fear and shame in relation to this particular archetype over this one. And
Yeah,
then in addition to that, we can also get other resources, those other archetypes in the reading that can add strength skill sets that we may not have put in that context before.
that's really cool. Now, do the cards typically line up well for your clients? Like as far
Yeah,
as the archetypes and stuff?
and I will say I'm teaching the tarot part because it is sort of on the way to my own. I'm developing a deck, but my deck is actually an archetypal deck specifically with the archetypes that I'm working with, so I don't have to use the tarot. I have used another deck, Caroline Mesa's archetype deck with clients before, but it was a little more limiting than what I wanted. So then I moved to tarot cards because I can take some of the archetypal characters that are in the set that I'm developing that are ascribed to the tarot. So it's a little bit more extensive, but that's actually an interim to get me to the next, because I'm in the process of finishing up an art deck. It's going to be finished maybe in mid-fall this year, and I'm going to be doing some workshops around that. But that's 130 cards to interact with, so it gives someone a real range to work with. And part of the beauty of working with cards over time is that you start with a certain set that are just what you what are most prominent at the moment. But over time, when you're working on personal growth, if you've ever wondered what grows in personal growth, like we know we talk about it as expansion, but what might it look like? For me, what I've noticed is, and especially in my own life, the reason why I wanted to create a deck of cards this big is because the more I do the work, the more archetypes I connect with. So the more I can actually have a visual standpoint of, or a visual representation of the growth of the work that I'm doing, because I start identifying with more and more characters, if that makes sense. So I get to see over time
Yeah,
the progression.
that's awesome. And this deck that you're developing, it's not going to be just for personal use, right? Are you going to make this available for other people such as yourself?
I am, but I'm going to be doing it a different way. I'm only going to be selling it through the workshops, because from my experience, you haven't heard, I'm guessing, too much about people working with archetype decks. Yeah, most people I
No.
know have no idea the power of archetypes. And even though there have been a few decks that exist, the main complaint that I've heard is that people don't know how to use them. And I thought, I don't want to create this amazing thing, even if I could, you can do a mass market sale that could bring in money. People like to have pretty cards. People like to collect different decks. I don't want a deck that's sitting on somebody's shelf collecting dust. This to me is an amazing, powerful toolkit. So I want to connect with people who are interested in this work, share it with them, and show them how to use it. And they can use it for themselves or with other people. But I'm going to be introducing the deck through the workshops, and that would be the way to get your hands on that. And what comes with it is an extensive guidebook on the 130 archetypes, their profiles, and also a couple of journals that are going to be with that. It's a whole kit of
That's so
itself on how
cool.
to do that work.
Yeah, that's so cool. And
Thanks.
that the artwork, I know you're an artist. Are you doing some of the artwork for the cards?
I am, and I've always been an artist, uh, but this was daunting at first because the kind of cards I was attracted to, I thought I I can't do the style that I want, because I thought but the thing is, to have somebody do 130 art pieces is a huge investment. And I started to play around, and just for myself, I thought, well, that would be very expensive, and somebody could drop the project at any time. It could be halfway done, something could interrupt them. I mean, it takes so long to do. And then if it was going to be affordable, I probably couldn't put a short time span on it. I would need, to accommodate that. So I went through this whole thing of being in denial that I could do the art. I also, at the time, hadn't done as much graphic stuff. So I got involved in just starting with the idea of, what if I just had a deck that that I could play around with, and putting stuff together. And then I realized that, I am really also attracted to collage styles. And I am very adept at taking pieces of things and putting them, um, reforming them to put together through collage. But I had a specific style I was going for. So I ended up doing blended collage art. And over time, I got better and better and better at it. And so I was like, I can do this deck. I can do it. And then at first I thought I'll just do 100 cards. But then when I'm getting into it, it was like, oh, I have to add a few more. I have to add a few more. I had to stop it at 130, because really there are thousands of archetypes. But I wanted to work with a set that were the most common for me, most common coming up with my clients, that can still give us a good range, and that I know there's nothing like it on the market right now, that it's very a unique set. So I'm excited. One thing I experienced while doing that, I had actually an experience that was sort of challenging for me as a human, as I had a retina detachment during the time of working on the cards, and that I lost vision in my eye for quite a while. I've been through,
That's scary.
it's very scary. I've been through 4 surgeries and a couple of laser procedures, and I have minimal eyesight, but I did retain some of my retina. I lost some of my retina. So just my right eye, it's very low vision. I have another lens that's put on. I have a scleral buckle. If anybody's had eye work done, it's a thing. It's like a silicone band is holding my eyeball together. But all of that was very scary for me, because also in that process, I learned from the eye physicians looking at it. I had several different specialists, and they basically also had to do laser work on the other eye. Although it was an injury that took me out, I was starting to get tears in my left eye too and didn't know it. And I had been told that I could have lost my vision in both eyes within a year. So very emotional. And
Wow.
especially I'm working on the biggest art project of my life, and I might go blind. So you don't think about that as something that could disrupt your life. You don't even think
Right.
that's a possible. I did not even know anybody personally who had had a retina detachment. Now I do. It's amazing. I'm not happy to say that, but it gets on your radar, and then you end up connecting. It's like the universal connections are
Yeah.
going out,
Yeah.
and you end up meeting more people. And actually, I've helped people to even discover problems with their eye because my story scared them so bad. People immediately start saying, I haven't had an eye doctor appointment, and they put it on the calendar right away. Because, when you think about how how much you use your eyesight to get around, my entire mind, I've been a sighted person since birth. If I go blind now, all of my references for everything are visual. Yeah, I mean, so much so visual that it would require a complete remapping of my orientation to the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
Wow. Like you said, I don't think that's something that sighted people even really consider.
No,
That's
and
scary.
so that's my PSA. Um, check out your eyes. Seeing the optometrist as you get older is more than just updating your glasses and contacts. It's actually good to just check on the actual um, the back side of your eye, if there are any tears. That's what's important. Or if you
Mhm.
have a lot of flashes or floaters, just get it checked out. Recommended.
You had mentioned the death card being attached. You attach it to the
Predator.
predator, and
Yeah.
I had watched a video and that you were talking about the predator and the narcissistic type of people, but also that just regular, I guess maybe I don't want to say regular, but people you wouldn't necessarily envision as a predator type of person having them kind of traits within them. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we, I will say that if you have the ability to conceive of a predator for yourself, or even relate to one in a story, and you feel scared about it, that archetype is within you. And it's usually in the form of a protector archetype, where we want to protect ourselves from a threat. Um, but certainly, if I'm protecting myself from a threat, um, I'm willing to go a long way to save myself. And sometimes that orientation could make me a predator to someone else. It's just a matter of, you know, whose side of the story you're getting you're getting really, because the villains never really view themselves as the villains. I mean, they might know they're hurting people, but in their story, uh, they have a story in which, when they engage in their behavior, if they're doing it from a place of non-empathy, which is what we're kind of talking about with full on um, people, the narcissist types, or more so actually the psychopathic people that we would worry about. They're operating from a different game of life. They're where it they just have different metrics. And so if you're in the way of their metric, they're not viewing themselves as the villain. They might know that what they do is scary and that's a power move, but they may not register themselves as the predator. In fact, the way that I look at people who are operating from a non-empathy standpoint is that they're most likely so disconnected from their divinity or from love that um, they view other people as a threat to them in almost any context. So in their mind, they're acting in self-defense from that standpoint. But it's a very, it's a sickness, you know, that disconnection.
You had mentioned that, the universe kind of aligned for you to, possibly meet other people, that have had detached retinas. Your thoughts on like the universe as far as when you're working with the cards. Do you think that there's that's at play, right?
Yeah, I think that's why there's an attraction there. Uh, so the way that I view it is the fun with tarot cards or any kind of cards, your oracle cards or whatever you're using, is that you are setting an intention to utilize what's already a sort of law in the universe. So there's a law of correspondence where what's inside of you can be reflected on the outside of you. And when that happens, when you have a moment of synchronicity in life, it feels magical for a moment. And that's a fun thing to expect and play with and notice, because it heightens the feeling of life a little bit more, where you start to feel like you are connected to a matrix of something that's bigger than yourself. And it's an instant moment of expansion when you feel that. So doing that with the tarot cards is sort of inviting that experience and saying, I want to have a magic experience where I want to see things that are reflected within me that are important to me show up in the cards, but reflect back to me in a way that challenges me, that allows me to see things in a new way. And this is using the cards for personal development. A lot of people maybe people that don't work with the cards as much, what I find, they may put it in a category of only for fortune telling. I'll tell you where that does work is that your potential that you're seeing in cards working with the archetypal nature is reflecting back what's with yourself. So it does sort of tell you what potential tracks are in your future based on what's going on right now. Like we only have the now, but how we are viewing the future now will affect what
That's
happens
right.
in the future now,
That's right.
you know,
That's right.
going forward.
Absolutely. So with that being said, then are we living in a simulation?
I definitely play in that model quite a bit. It is useful. I like to think of things from a micro to macro. I think that the purpose, on one hand, I can say there's no purpose, and on the other hand, I can say there's a design. What I will say is it is a reflection in micro to macro that tells me that there is a connection, and I enjoy the magic of those connections. So I like to play in this model the most. Are we in a simulation that we are able to create video games that we go into with avatars? And even within those worlds, there are rules, there are boundaries that we can't cross. Even if we wanted to, there's still boundaries. Sort of like I can extrapolate that and say, okay, well, I can't just jump out a window and fly. So there's rules in this world, whether you're looking at gravity or density. You know, I need to figure out what are the rules of this world. And I do think there are some magical rules as well, as far as, that synchronicity piece does let us know that we are connected and we can see, and I'm using from a logic perspective, the reason why this feels magical is because it's not always seemingly probable. Like the probability of some of these things that have happened to me.
Yes, especially synchronicities.
Yeah, I mean, that's what kind of defines them,
Yeah,
is that, and you can't always explain that to somebody else, because it really only works for you because it's an inner outer. So it's something that's resonating inside of you, and that's the part you can't prove to the other person. They have to have that experience for themselves, and they first have to expect that that experience is a thing before they can even register it. So that has to be in place.
that's very, very valid point.
But when you do have those moments, it can be super creepy. I mean, the level in which I've had, even like I've gotten to where, I used to write plays back in the day, because my connection to theater, I used to also do a lot of writing. I have written scripts that I ended up hearing the people I based those scripts on loosely, that I didn't know that well. I was in a situation where they started speaking the lines that I wrote word for word in a couple of lines together. And it was an unusual combination of people that didn't always talk together. And I just thought I was in the Truman Show for a second. I mean, it was that level
That's
of
strange.
holy, but now, and then I was like, man, I've been writing the wrong stories. I need to get working on, what do I want? Like, but it freaked me out in a good and bad way. That's a lot of responsibility to know, oh, whoa, did I do that? Am I affecting that? Is this real? That's when you start to think, is this a simulation? I need to talk to the manager.
Exactly.
I need to,
What's
excuse me, I need to, can I just, yeah.
what do you believe the purpose of the simulation is, if we are living in a simulation? Is it just to have experience, or
So that's a good question. I don't know for sure, but again, and I use this language, you'll notice I'm using language that allows for other options, because I'm somebody who likes to keep the door
well,
open.
that,
But
which is smart. I mean, that's an intelligent person thinking right there, because I mean, none of us really know, right? And
right,
I think, you never want to be closed-minded, or just stuck on one thing, without 100% proof. So yeah, go ahead,
sure.
I'm sorry.
The model I like to play in is the one where that makes the most sense to me in a holistic standpoint of everything that I'm putting together. A lot of the pieces, it's like puts a lot of the puzzle pieces in place for me. So I feel like it seems pretty solid for me, is that we are here for the learning experience of sort of the physical world, and being a sort of uh, a consciousness in a physical body, in a world of polarities, where we do have the perception of free choice, and that's important to go with. And because it, for me, it's very important to consider how free choice plays into everything, that's a part of it. When people ask me, is there such a thing as free will, or are things predetermined? I would say, well, it's kind of a particle and a wave thing, but we can only experience time in a linear capacity, cause and effect, one in front of the other. And from that perspective, you can only see free will. We can only experience free will. If we had a different perspective, which we can't access in this form, theoretically, based on laws, it would all have already been written. But right now, all that we have access to are all the potentials.
I love that point about free will. I guess I never really looked at free will that way with time, and how you would perceive it that way if you perceive time linear. That's valid.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the people who are trapped the most would be people that are here and viewing the world as very fatalistic. Those are the people that are using tarot to say, what's my future that's already been set for
Right.
me? They've outsourced their free will
Right.
to an external source. And by the way, if you don't ever own that you are a free agent with choice, you will just be taking on other programs. So somebody's going to be making the choices, and you will have already made the choice to do that. If you're just not investigating it, that's your choice. You're
Right.
going along with what someone else has prescribed for you. But
Which is
you'll
not good,
start
I
to
agree.
notice when you do work with people, if you work with people, that we all have an innate sense of wanting agency, of like wanting to own our own perspective in the world and express it. And we feel our emotional thermostat is affected by how able we are to express ourselves authentically or not. It's a big deal.
That's deep. Dreams. Tell me
Dream.
about them. You work with, what do you know about dreams?
So, dreams are also the subconscious.
Part of the simulation.
It is a simulation, it seems. I mean, but it's one where we're more of an observer along for the ride. I listened to one of your episodes where you had a guest. I think his name was Brad Kelly, the writer, who you guys talked about dreams.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's fascinating.
And I liked his theory of how it's sort of like a defrag, where it's putting things together in a narrative. I completely subscribe to that. A lot of times, if it's present day, sometimes I'll wake up and know exactly where the pieces came from, but the message would be encoded in the value of what was being expressed in the narrative and how you felt about it. So it can be showing you something you need to work on if you're scared or you're stressed. Some people might take it as, oh, that's a warning. I've only had a couple of, well, I had one weird dream that was a warning when I was younger. It's an interesting story. I could tell that one. When I was younger, I had a nightmare about that I was with my dad. We were in our minivan driving in some neighborhood I hadn't been in. And it was night, starting to get dark. It was almost completely dark. And so late at night, and our car breaks down. And in the dream, we don't have a phone with us. This is in the days, showing my age, before everybody had a cell phone in their pocket. You might have a cell phone you plugged into your car, but we didn't have that in the dream. So we needed to go talk to some of the houses to make a phone call about our car being broken down. And I saw a house with a light on at the straight ahead at the T of an intersection. It was an A-frame house. And I thought, oh, well, there's a light on where these other houses seem a little dark and I don't want to wake anybody. It seems like it's late. And my dad started going a different direction, but I was like, oh, I'm going to go to this house. I think it's going to be the fastest. Somebody's going to be awake. It was very logical, even in my dream. So I get there, and then right before I get to the door of the house, I'm knocked back by an invisible force really hard on my ass. And I hear this voice say, get away from the house. There's evil in the house. And that was at a time where I didn't really think in those like ominous terms. And I thought, that voice, and I was like, was that in my own head? And I was like, no, I must have just slipped. I even had this conversation. I'm trying to be logical, even in my dream, now that I think about it. That's weird. But I'm talking myself, like, no, there's not, this is silly. There's not evil in the house. I don't know why. I just slipped. And then so I get up and I start to go again, and I'm knocked back again, and I get away from the house. There is evil in the house. And then I realized that's not my voice. That's not even my inner voice. That is a disembodied voice. And I couldn't really make out that it was any particular person, but it was, they didn't seem threatening, but they did seem like they cared about me and they were warning me. And it was so vivid, this dream. And I even felt as if I had been knocked down when I woke up, like it was that kind of like bone rattling. So I was about, I might have been 16 or so when I had the dream. And I went to my mom and I said, have I ever been to a house that's like, I described it. And she was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't think. I said, let me draw it for you. So I sketched it on a piece of paper and I showed her and I said, have you ever seen this house? And she said, no. She's like, you can ask your dad. So I took the picture to him. I said, have I ever been to a house like this? Would there be any reason why I would think anything of a house like this? I have a bad memory or whatever. No, doesn't look familiar to me. Weird. So About 4 months later, we're driving, and I grew up Christian. My parents were taking me to a new pastor's house in a subdivision. We were invited to go meet them, and we're driving in our van, and we turn a corner, and it's not his house, but we're on our way there. Suddenly my mom gasps and says, "Oh, oh my gosh, Jen, look." And we stop, and everybody looks ahead, and it's the house that I drew. There it is.
That
It's
is
right
so
there.
creepy.
It gets creepier. Now I don't go in this house, but now the question is why? Why this house? Why did I have that message about this house? What's about this house? So my mom decides we're going to ask the pastor when we get there, like what he knows about this house. So we turn the corner. I'm like, we're not going to that house, or we know we're not. That's good. It's around the corner, down the way. And I was like, that's really scary. So we go in, it comes up in conversation. My mom brings it up, and they look horrified. And then they kind of look at me, and then they're kind of creeped out by me. Oh, she had this dream about this house, that there's something evil in the house. And they just kind of like, well, what's going on with the house? And they said, well, here's all we can tell you about the house. The neighborhood believes it's haunted because every time someone moves into it, they won't stay longer than 2 weeks. They tried to sell it, they can't sell this house. So that seemed like a confirmation, but it gets even better. That's all that I got at that time. And I thought, well, maybe that was it. I just picked up on something with this weird house in a neighborhood we were going to. No, that's not the whole thing. A couple years later from that event, I get a call from a girlfriend of mine who's I graduated with. She's married, and she's updating me on her life. And she says, guess what? Bowen and I are going to buy a house. And she started describing it. She's like, and it's such a good deal. And she says, and it's in this neighborhood.
Oh
And
man.
and I say, I need you to sit down. Is it an A-frame house at the T of an intersection? Yes. I need you to sit down, and I'm going to get my mom to vouch for this thing I'm about to tell you. And I told her the story, and she says to me, oh my gosh, that's why the realtor wouldn't even show it to me. They left the key in a hide-a-luck. Nobody would come to meet us to go through this house. It turns out too that there's a cemetery on the lot. It's like the location of the main farmhouse on the neighborhood lot. And there's an old ancient cemetery there, but I don't really think that's it. I think there's probably more sinister stuff going on more recently that I would pick up on that. And I haven't gotten any more answers beyond that, but dreams, sometimes they can give you information that you don't even know why you're getting it. But I was able to stop her from buying the house.
Well, at least she listened.
She did. Unfortunately, she was creeped out enough by the story and everyone vouching for me that, but again, that's one of those things. If I feel like I hadn't told people and also had them go through that experience with me, it would just be, well, I remember this thing I had, this dream I had about a similar kind of house. It carried more weight that other people had the experience. And I think that's why it's hard to prove those synchronicity moments. But, it's good to listen to the subconscious if you're open to messages like that, and you are setting the intention that you want the messages coming in to be of good use to you for your best, highest good.
Wow, it's been a fascinating show.
We
So
went
I
a
feel
little
like there's
different
so
direction,
much.
but
I
that
feel
was a
like
lot of
there's
fun.
yeah, I feel like there's so much we could talk about. Um, still, but can you maybe talk a little bit about your written work, share your book with the listeners, and then maybe let us know where we can get a hold of you?
Sure. So, unrelated to stuff we've been talking about here, other than it is helping a specific group of people with transformation, and has some hypnosis exercises, specifically single women. I do have a copy of this book here. My book is called Steal His Heart, Save Your Life, just not in that order. The Still Single Woman's Guide to the Subconscious Art of Attracting a Man. I have done some time as a matchmaker as well, for a short time when I lived in Chicago, and that informed me on sort of the differences between men and women and how they approach dating. And I've worked with both men and women in my practice, for finding love, especially after heartbreak. But I happen to have, because of ladies and word of mouth, a slew of women, enough that I had a lot of case studies to put in the book, or things to reference in the book, and feel really confident about different examples and stories because they came from the clients that I was working with at the time. So that was the first book I've written. I may eventually write more for different angles, but yeah, so that's available on Amazon. You can reach me at jenwilding.com is my just sort of personal bio website. My project with cards, Archetype Wisdom is the name of that. And it would be archetype-wisdom.com to get to that, to find out about those workshops. You might want to get on the mailing list if you're interested, see what's coming up. Also, if you're interested in learning how to do the shadow work through tarot readings, I have an online course right now at shadowworktarot.com.
Excellent. Hey, thanks again, Jen, for coming on the show. It's been
Thank you.
fascinating topic. Thank you.
Yeah, you have a great show. I look forward to hearing even more exploration of these very interesting topics you have going on. Good stuff.
Thank you. Thank you.